that frame rater.
Ace of Aces. Ace of Aces is a flight simulator. It's a lot of blue. Blue and clouds at a very low frame rate. Occasionally an enemy pops up. When I say occasionally, I mean quite rarely. I don't know, I've played far worse than this, but pretty much all of these are going to be on the same scale for me. To be fair to the game, I'm leaving its rating as undecided. Alien Brigade. A light gun game, but you can use a crosshair. It's a bit confusing at first. I have no idea who's on my team and who isn't. Wait, if there's an alien crisis going on, why are the troops still engaging in civil war? There's a common enemy here, why are you shooting me? The game is fast-paced and has good sound integration. I'm gonna go with good. Asteroids. I was expecting to give this one average, but this is probably the best version of the game I've played yet. What you do is shoot asteroids, which split into smaller asteroids, and also eliminating alien threats that pass by. I'm not sure what makes this one so much more fun to me. I guess the color and sound? Sure, graphics don't make the game, but when it comes to the simplicity of 2600 versus 7800, I think it kinda can. It's not quite a great game, neither average, so it gets a good. Ballblazer. The same Lucasfilms game we played on the 5200, now with crisper graphics. Oh, remember that other game they made? Rescue on Fractalus? I learned a bit more about that one. It has what is said to be gaming's very first jump scare. I know this deviates from the 7800, but now knowing that, I simply had to mention it. Anyways, Ballblazer. Battle against your opponent by shooting glow balls towards the goal on the other side of the map, collected and guided by your ship. At first I wondered how it sounded so good for a 7800 game. Turns out it has a sound chip encoded on the cartridge. Should you find someone to play with, it makes for a great time. Barnyard Blaster is unplayable for me, light gun only, so let's head on over to YouTube to see what we missed. Seems to be a very simple collection of shooting minigames. I see in one game you're shooting mice, birds, and chicken. You know, in a barn. You'd think those are supposed to be there. In fact, I think shooting them is counterproductive to your duties as a farmer. Seems about as fun as its backdrops, which are, you know, chores. I haven't played myself, but there's no way this game ain't bad. Basketbrawl is, of course, basketball. However, it adds some extra spice, such as the ability to hit others. Disregarding this, it's a fairly typical basketball game, but putting into consideration the console limits, this looks and plays pretty nice. Many will consider this the greatest sports game on the 7800, and I'd say that's a title worthy of Basketbrawl. There's such a unique charm to this game. I think it's deserving of being called an excellent title. Centipede, the game where you shoot a descending centipede, but also other bugs that drop along the way. This is fairly similar to the 5200 release, but has some better visuals. Feels a lot better to play as a result. It's fairly pretty now. Honestly, it's great. Choplifter is another one of those gotta be on everything games. It's a pretty good one. Fly off into the desert and land nearby your captured civilians to take them back home to safety. You can take down intruding enemy artillery along the way. Not much to say about this one. It's great. Commando is a vertically scrolling action title straight from the arcades. Easy to play, difficult to master. I generally like this game, it's not my favorite, but it's a solid title. As you get further down the line, more enemies spawn in for you to dispose of, with either your machine gun or throwable grenades. It's a bit repetitive, but there are a few curveballs in the gameplay with artillery you'll need to single-handedly deal with. Nice looking game for the console, with quality sound. Reason for that is it being one of the two games that use the enhanced chip on the cart. Yep, Commando on the 7800 is pretty great. Cracked, or Cracked, is another light gun game. You can use a crosshair. The concept's kind of interesting. You're saving some bird's eggs by shooting all the incoming predators. If you shoot a predator who has captured an egg, so long as it's above one of the nests below, you'll actually get it back. As far as early console light gun shooters go, this one is good, but not far from being average. Now, Crossbow is something special. Another light gun game, but here you're saving a squad passing through many dangerous locations in order to get them, somewhere? But that doesn't matter. What matters is keeping them out of harm's way. One dies and that's permanent. However, you collect more to your squad as you progress. You can also choose which path to take, though it allows you to revisit the same places, which is a bit odd. This game is excellent. Dark Chambers guide your warrior through a series of maze-like areas, finding keys when necessary, and ridding of the evils as you cross them with giant balls of fire in this top-down perspective. I never quite understood how shooting a monster turns it into a different monster, but this is the case for every monster you shoot. They have this kind of league system where the stronger monsters will consistently be demoted until you've completely finished them off. There's gotta be a reason for that I'm missing. Nonetheless, whether you be more familiar with Gauntlet or not, Dark Chambers makes for a great 7800 experience. Desert Falcon reminds me a lot of Zaxxon. You see the similarity? Isometric flight. Zaxxon's air enemies were always hard to interpret. How high do I have to be to shoot certain foes down? Desert Falcon suffers from a similar problem. Doesn't help that most enemies in the game are airborne. With a little practice, however, it can be very fun. The goal is to reach the end of the stage, then destroy the boss that appears. Moments after, you hop on over to the next one. I like how you can jump about on the sand. That's pretty unique for a shmup. It'll take some time to get used to, no doubt, but once you fully understand how to play Desert Falcon, it is incredibly fun. Excellent score here. Dig Dug is what probably inspired the fetishization of inflation. Why did I say that? Anyways, you tunnel through the ground to the ruts of nearby enemies to inflate them until they pop. They can also ghost through the ground to make their way to you, so watch out. I've always thought Dig Dug to be an excellent game, and the 7800 version looks great. Though between this and the NES release, there's definitely no contest, and that's going to be a theme in this video. Donkey Kong is the beloved Nintendo mascot that definitely didn't go overshadowed by the antagonist Mario. Or is he the antagonist? I mean, if Donkey Kong is based on King Kong, and Kong is usually not considered the bad guy overall, whatever. Anyways, this 7800 release is pretty good, even if I find that every version of this game has outdated player physics. That's a fairly objective comment. If you haven't played Donkey Kong before, then the platforming will likely not be your forte. I'm pretty big for my sound in video games, and I'd have to say that it's not so hot in this release. It's another case of greatly preferring the NES release, but all things considered, I suppose it's unfair to knock Donkey Kong for staying within its limitations. Donkey Kong Jr. sounds gross. Ugh, just listen to that awful beeping. In this one, you gotta make your way to Donkey Kong to save him from Mario. What a twist. It's like regular Donkey Kong, but more advanced. It's a pretty good looking game for the 7800. Funny that it's an IP from their at-the-time competitor. It plays fine. The game itself comes just short of being excellent for its primitive controls. Get it? Primitive? Anyways, fix your dang sound, Atari. Yikes. Double Dragon. Oh geez, this game again. I always feel inclined to say something nice because of how popular it is, but I don't like it. At least, none of the console versions. I haven't tried the arcade game. All I do is get beat up nonsensically with what I think are only 2 actual fighting moves. You can sort of stun-lock a single enemy by kicking them into the side of the screen, which is only a temporary advantage. The music loop is very short, which is irritating. I don't know why the backgrounds are far more detailed than the character sprites. For you Double Dragon fans out there, I'm sorry, but this... how could this be anything but bad? Maybe I just suck at this, but I couldn't help being tossed around like a big bowl of salad at a vegan convention. F-18 Hornet. Alright, second flight sim. Took me ages to find out how to get off the ground. Once I did get off the ground, well, you're supposed to shoot these tanks on the ground, but I haven't managed to get one, except for when I was still on the runway. There are multiple missions to undergo, and I imagine with practice and know-how this game could be rather entertaining, but I just found myself getting confused. I knew what I was supposed to do, but I had no idea how to do it, so... undecided? Fatal Run. If you ever played Road Blasters, it's just like that, but a lot slower paced. Has a somehow not entirely annoying background music loop, and wow, a vehicle that doesn't sound like TV static. Anyways, you're basically traveling through... the country? I don't know. But on the way you can upgrade your car and buy more ammunition. Yeah, you'll be shooting down other cars, by the way. At the end of a stage, you get to see all the innocent souls you took from this planet. That's something. I noticed the first time I went into the shop, this dude had a mustache. Next time I went there, he was clean shaven. Good to see digitized characters are taking care of themselves. This game is great. Fight Night. Oh, so that's another thing I don't care for. But I guess it goes hand in hand with sports. Here's a boxing game. You know, I actually do like Punch-Out, but this? Yeah, I don't know what's going on, and I don't have an interest to figure it out. This might be fun if you like this sort of thing. Undecided. Food Fight. A classic example of graphics don't match the gameplay because boy oh boy does this one look primitive, but it's a lot of fun. You gotta get to your ice cream cone at the end of the stage before it melts. All the while, you're throwing food you find around the place at anybody who stands in your way. Gulp! It has no right to be as fun as it is, but it is. Excellent game. Galaga. This pales in comparison to the NES port. Both graphics and sound can't compare. It's a world of difference. While these things will hurt the experience, what matters most is the gameplay. Does 7800's Galaga deliver with that? Well, it does work. The problem is it's a bit slow. I could reach rounds in the double digits without having lost a single life. I suppose on its own it could be enjoyed, though without the challenge, Galaga becomes repetitive. I've played worse interpretations of this game, but I can't say that makes this to anyone's preference. In Hat Trick, you'll be put up against an unrelenting single AI player who's probably going to win the first game. Hat Trick feels like a more chaotic version of Pong where both paddles can freely move around the board. Frame rate definitely calls for an improvement in this game. Apparently most 7800 fans hate this game. I don't know, I kinda like it. It's stupidly simple, and I like stupidly simple. I think it's good. Ikari Warriors is much like Commando, and I feel in terms of what they accomplish in a gameplay environment, this was a greater execution. You can even pilot vehicles like a tank. What I've said for Commando can easily be applied here, so I can't really elaborate without being redundant. What I will say is the world feels more developed. Mostly to thank is the added work on details like shrubbery and weeds. This to me feels like yet another must-have for the 7800. It's excellent. Impossible Mission is an early example of an adventure game, but at the same time it's also a puzzler. Look around a giant underground base for clues to your escape. Stay a while. Stay forever. Besides the weird jumping physics, it still is a very enjoyable game. Unfortunately, I've been informed that the 7800 port is actually impossible. At some point there was a homebrewed copy of the game that fixed a game-breaking bug, and the homebrew was called, of course, Possible Mission. It's a great game, but shame for the bug. As such, I'll go for good. You can at least still have a great time up until a certain point. Jinx starts off with a great introduction. Actual voice synth. I think this is the only game on the system with voice synth. But then the game starts. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the one. This is the game that physically hurt my ears and gave me a headache for the remainder of the day. I'm sure you can figure out why. I don't care how fun the game might be, this just ruins the entire experience. Though to be honest, the game itself is kinda confusing. It's like a weird Breakout/Pinball clone, or something. It tries to mesh a whole bunch of different ideas together, and I came to find it just makes for an absolute mess. Time to never listen to this abomination again. It's bad. Joust. I say it every time, but it's balloon fight before balloon fight. Easiest way to explain it. Otherwise, you just bop the other jousters on the head and take their egg so it doesn't spawn into another jouster. Do this to all jousters and it proceeds with a more difficult wave. Level hazards develop as you progress. It's one of the arcade era's most famous games, and for good reason. It's lots of fun, and this port of the game doesn't hold back. It isn't as detailed as the arcade game, but I actually like the simplistic look of the pixelated graphics here. Almost more than the original. But whatever, Joust is excellent. Karateka. A Korean erotica. Okay, well no, not really. Am I the only one who instinctively associates this with the Star Wars theme? Anyways, after a lengthy introduction, our hero emerges to fight his first opponent. And that's about as far as I can get in this one. In Kung Fu Master, you make your way from either the left or right side of the screen, attacking enemies that approach you as you go. The goal is to reach the final wall, where the game then takes you to the next floor, so on and so forth. There are zombies that can be dealt with using a quick kick, but you'll have to watch out for knife throwers that give you only a short amount of time to realize when they're going to throw. I suppose this game can be fun in spurts. One thing about this port is how you have two moves, a punch and a kick. However, the developers mapped that all to one button. Not the smartest move. I'll rank this one as good. Mario Bros. Another demonstration of why not to make music on the 7800. But alright, the game is actually rather solid. Mario bops the above platforms under Koopas and Krabs and other troublemakers, then kicks them off after reaching the above platform. Mario Bros has strange jumping physics, not unlike most games of this time. Took until Super Mario Bros to get it right, and even then it still had a long way to go. Anyways, this port of the game is much faster than its 5200 iteration, and has a far better presentation in both saturation and contrast. It's also quite a bit harder than other versions of the game. I'm not a huge fan of this game in general, but I'd say it still is a good one, particularly with how it was handled here. Map Mania Challenge. You wanna wrestle? Good, cause that's what you do here. Pretty nice graphics on this one, even details on the audience. It's really not bad, all things considered. It's another wrestling game, but with satisfying finishing moves. These can only be so good on this hardware though, so yeah, good. Mean 18 Golf. One of the few examples of an early generation golf game that isn't a complete waste of time. You actually get a real sense of progression since your character is actually visibly making it closer to the goal. It's also very easy to guide your shot. Closer to the hole, you get an enhanced top-down view, which is very helpful. Yeah, this one's actually pretty great. Meltdown. This is a light gun game. No crosshair enabled, so off to YouTube again. I had a hard time keeping track with this one. It has to do with some nuclear reactor and you're trying to get rid of sparks planted by terrorists that could set it off. There's a bit more to this, but basically you're trying to prevent the thing from having a meltdown. I can't determine its fun factor, but it doesn't look like anything special to me. In that case, I'd probably just rather play kicks. Undecided. Midnight Mutants has one of the best video game intros of all time. Burn, witch. I will return. I'm back. So this is a fairly in-depth adventure game where you gotta collect items, kill enemies in your path, throw stuff. Most of the appeal comes from the environment. Very unique environments as well. It's a nice looking game. Each acre feels distinctly different. The game has to do with saving your grandpa or something like that. It's some kind of spin on the CBS sitcom The Munsters. Sorry, haven't seen it. The gameplay is a bit clunky, but still a lot of fun. It's weird because the more complex these games get, the less I feel I have to say about them. Maybe that's because to say any more would require I actually start reviewing the game, because I think by now you get the gist of it. So let's avoid that and put it at this. It's pretty great. Motor Psycho. Why is it so many Atari racing games feel the need to assault your ears? At least it's tolerable here. The game itself is actually quite fun. What can I say about it, really? Well, one thing is you can jump. You can jump really high if you time it right. I don't even think this was intended, to be honest. The way the level warps around the terrain is exciting, and seeing the road up in the distance is awesome for the hardware. Only real negative I have is that it's kinda easy to crash into other bikers. I mean, either you're huge or the road is very small. It's almost got a great for me, but I'm sticking with a high good. You know Miss Pac-Man, the maze-sprawling, dot-munching classic sequel that's infinitely better than the original. This is a very solid port of the game. Thankfully, when it comes to games like this, the graphics really don't matter too much. It's all about style, and this one has that. This is excellent. Ninja Golf. You know this game was using its absurdity as a marketing technique. Ninja Golf? Heck yeah, gotta check that one out. Well, I checked it out. It's really unique, I'll say that. You hit the golf ball and make your way to it while fighting incoming lizards and other ninjas. The combat is extremely simple, to the point where it's kinda just annoying. I'd much rather just get to the ball already. The potential for a fun game is here, but with what it provides, it kinda wears thin. There's a boss fight at the hole, which is something. A lot of people tend to like this game when it comes to the 7800 library, but I don't know. Believe me, I want to love this as much as you do, but I found it to be average. One-on-one basketball. Now, this one reminds me of that basketball game on the 2600. But this one, it's kind of uncanny. Those lanky limbs, the jittery movement, kinda disturbing to be honest. But if you get over that, you got a fairly entertaining little sports game. Quite literally, just one-on-one basketball. I really love how you can break the glass. That was a fun little detail. But I can't help but feel like a lot of the development time was spent on that one idea alone. There's not much here. It's average. Pete Rose Baseball. Great graphics. Now, maybe I just didn't figure out the controls, but some of the layout decisions here kinda confused me. Like how the fielder is always set to a certain place in the field, and I don't think you can move him until the ball enters that vicinity. Makes it hard to get the competitor out. Still, I think there's a decent interpretation of baseball here if you figure it out. I could be wrong though. Undecided. Planet Smashers. You know Action 52? This feels like if one of those developers was tasked to make an Astro Warrior clone, but the publishers had at least a little bit of quality control. Because yeah, this feels like a couple steps above an Action 52 game. That's not a good thing. Very simple, not much going on. The screen can get a bit crowded, but it's all the same stuff over and over. Some extra time spent could have made this something enjoyable, but as it is, it's just a very bare bones shmup. Huh, just watched the CGR review of this and he also compared it to Astro Warrior. What's that channel called now? 80s Comics? I'm sure it'll be called something else next week. The game is bad. Pole Position 2. I never felt the pole position games aged well, but they still have their fans. The racetrack itself is very smooth, but unfortunately the F1 racer only has a couple of sprites. The vivid color is nice, though you can get that elsewhere on the 7800 if you really look. For those that love pole position, I can't tell you that this is a bad way to play it, though I'm not highly experienced with the game as a whole. I feel kind of at a middle ground with this one, which means I'll call it good, because my ranking system is weird. Rampage. In this game, you climb tall buildings, causing absolute havoc. You can literally eat people. Try not to, though, if they're carrying explosives, cause shit's spicy. It's basically just a city chaos simulator, and you're the natural disaster. Rampage is alright. It was a very original concept during its prime. For some reason it had a movie recently starring The Rock, despite Rampage being a pretty obscure property for the last, 30 years? How many people saw it knowing it was based on a game? This one's a lot better with a second player, but it's still pretty fun on its own. I'm giving it a high good. RealSports Baseball was great on the 5200. The 7800 should be a step above, right? Well, first off, those voice synths are removed. Kinda expected that though with the inferior sound chip. Secondly, to me it looks pretty much the same as the 5200 game, just darker. It seems to have a more foreign control scheme as well, because I often had no idea why I was throwing the ball over to whoever got it. Not feeling this one, which is a shame considering what came before it. It's average. Robotron 2084. This is often seen as the killer app for the system. It's often the killer app for just about every system around that time. Why? Well, for most consoles it utilized two controllers, just like the arcade counterpart. A twin-stick shooter is what they call it. One controller to move the player, one controller to aim around the arena and shoot. Your mission is to save the last remaining human families, so be sure to collect them before they get eliminated by the robots. Get rid of specific robots on screen to progress to the next level. Totally hectic, totally fun, totally recommended. Excellent. Scrapyard Dog is the closest thing to a 2D platformer on the system. You can move really fast, but like Bubsy, that's detrimental to your progress in most cases. 2 hits and you're dead. To boot, you only get a couple lives. What you're trying to do is recover your stolen dog from someone called Mr. Big. You'll collect clues and avoid or jump on various baddies along the way. There's even a black market merchant type fellow who will sell you inventory items. The game is particularly fun due to all the wacky traps you'll have to avoid, like windows that open and can knock you off a higher surface into a dangerous area. It's a crazy game and I love it, but it might be a bit frustrating since it can be kinda difficult. Great game all the same. Sentinel is another light gun game that I don't think works with a crosshair. I mean, there is one, but you can barely move it. I'm not sure what was going on here. I looked up this game to find out more. So basically, a scientist created a miniature sun in order to suck up all the alien invaders on the planet. That's a really weird concept. I guess some enemies will damage the sun, so you have to shoot them before the sun sucks them up. The sun just moves horizontally on the screen until the level ends. Then it goes to the next one in a new environment. There's some spins to the formula, like power-ups and whatnot. Sort of what you'd expect for this kind of thing. It's interesting, but I have no real opinion on it. Undecided. Summer Games. Participate in a series of mini-games inspired by Olympic events. Seems there's a lot less on offer here compared to the 5200. The games included also aren't that interesting. I don't know. Average. Super
Huey!
Third Flight Sim. While you are flying in open space, it kinda felt like a first-person Robotron because the opposition was always just slowly making its way over to my position. It was kinda creepy. They close in on you from all directions. You've got firepower in the form of turrets and missiles to take care of them. It's repetitive but chaotic enough to have some fun with. The game is good. Super Skateboardin. Never has a game surprised me past its title more than this one. Turns out it's kind of a platformer. You ride your skateboard through a large house, trying to turn off all the electronics inside to reduce the wattage on the bottom left of the screen. You can easily keep track of where you've been since the doors will be permanently left open after you've left. There's a bunch of tubes that'll take you to other levels in the house should you crouch in front of them. You might criticize the lack of a soundtrack, but given this is the 7800, I see that as a positive. This game is great. Tank Command. You pilot this green tank that shoots projectiles at varying degrees. This is determined by the energy on the bottom right of the screen. Shoot everything that moves to progress. I found it pretty irritating to determine where the shot will line up. It's going to be a bit of a memorization thing after trial and error. The majority of the game is just moving forwards waiting for the next target. The game is bad. Title Match Pro Wrestling. Pretty much the same deal as that other wrestling game, but less detail on background characters. What you see is what you get with this one. Also, you can do this. The whole time I was playing, I got hit like once or twice by the other guy. In my respects, I'll end this now with an average. Tomcat F-14 Simulator. Fourth Flight Sim. Another case of how do I get off the ground. Once you do get off the ground, you fly. A lot. There's a lot of blue. I mean, really a lot of blue. In fact, flying around for 10 minutes, I saw nothing but blue. I don't think that's a good sign. But upon looking this up, it's seen as the best 7800 flight sim. I don't see how that's the case, but clearly I must have been missing something here. Undecided. Touchdown Football. I really like the introductory theme. Graphics were alright, frame rate is very poor. I don't know anything about football really. All I could really figure out is how to initiate a dog pile on someone. I don't imagine this would score too high due to the janky frame rate, but I can't really judge it properly, so undecided. Tower Toppler. I've seen this one a handful of times, probably for other systems though. Apparently the developer of this one was another soul to leave us in 2016, the Year of the Dead. Anyways, this is a very impressive game that utilizes a unique blend of 2D sprites simulated to represent a 3D environment. How the game is played is by avoiding the projectiles whilst you climb this large tower. You can use elevators to reach certain areas, and also go into doors that'll take you elsewhere. You can also shoot some of the projectiles with your eggs, I hope. The goal is, presumably, to make it to the top. I didn't get there because it's not only rather difficult, it's limited in what it's able to pull off. Many times there'd be a hole in the ground that I simply didn't notice, causing me to fall downwards. Thankfully, you can't die unless you're thrown to the very bottom. Unfortunately though, there's a strict time limit, which I feel isn't necessary to the game. Tower Toppler is an incredible sight, which likely inspired many familiar indie games in the early 2010s. But as is per usual with this sort of thing, it could have been better represented. This here's a good game that could have easily been excellent, had there been a couple quality of life improvements. Water Ski is my favorite game on the system. With a name like that, I wasn't expecting anything special, but oh man. If this were released today, I could imagine it being a popular rage bait YouTuber game. It's very difficult, but fair. Just takes a lot of patience and skill. What you do is move your boat across the river, whilst also aiming the skier behind you. Move the boat with the joystick, skier with the 2 buttons. You can even pull off stunts for bonus points. The only thing I'd really critique here is some of the environmental placements. Some locations sort of lead you directly into your doom, so I guess it isn't always fair, but there's still a way to go about it properly each time. I didn't actually manage to get past the first level, but I had a lot of fun trying to. This is a great game. For winter games, it's pretty much the same case as summer games. These are slightly more entertaining in my opinion, but still nothing special. Average. Xenophobe. In this game, you depart from your spaceship to other smaller vessels overtaken by aliens. The point of the game is to eliminate the threat and pick up evidence, then blow the thing to Kingdom Come to make sure the contained incident is isolated. You have limited ammunition and weaponry, so conservation is key. Of course, you'll also have to be aware of the alien threats which will actively hunt you down. This is an arcade port, and the reason why most of your screen is missing is because extra players are meant to fill up that darkness once they enter the game. This is a very exciting, somewhat creepy experience that I consider to be lots of fun. It's excellent. Xevious. You pilot a small spaceship in this vertical scrolling shmup, attacking all the enemy defenses whether at your level or on the ground below. There's apparently some way to use both buttons for this one, but for this footage I didn't know how to do that, so I just used a 1-button setup. It is a very challenging game with loads of projectiles quickly heading for your relatively slow-moving ship. Navigate with caution. One wrong maneuver could be your death. Eventually you'll come across a large enemy base which is tougher than anything before it. This is an arcade port which has very accurate sound to its counterpart. Graphically, it is distinguishable, which is leaps and bounds better than what I can say for the Atari 2600 prototype. Xevious is a true classic, and its conversion to the 7800 is excellent. And those were the Atari 7800's 58 officially released games. What I think overall? I don't know. I do apologize to fans of the system, but I often struggle to find positives for this one. The lineup of games is okay. There are some gems here, though the majority can be played elsewhere with much greater success, namely the Nintendo. Yes, the 7800 was cheaper, but as it turned out, in this case, less did not equal more. The Nintendo also had a much better controller to use, so the reasons to go with the 7800 at any point during its lifetime were slim. At least the controller was still a step above the 5200s. Speaking of that console, since I did my last console library video on it, I've invested a bit more money into the games and even a controller converter that lets me use a dedicated Jaguar controller. The 5200 may be a flawed system, but once you've got a more acceptable option for control, it's almost good? I intend to make another video in the near future, revisiting the console after all this time. Not the whole library again, just the stuff I've collected since, and why I feel the console is kind of underrated. At least, I think it is today. But let's get back to the 7800. An abundance of sports and confusing flight sims already puts it pretty low in a library priority for me. Some few exclusives are fun, but is that really enough? I guess the real question is whether or not the 7800 library appeals to you. Beyond that, there is Homebrew, which I've heard a good few things about. Some game called Ricky and Vicky is considerably impressive. This game came out simultaneously on Steam and the 7800. Well, that's all I've got to say for this one, so thanks for watching this console library video. I'll see you all in the next one.